It's better to be dead than live with a disability, and I find issue.
Welcome, one and all, to another episode of the Death of Certainty Show, where we recognize no matter how right we think we are, we might be wrong and we should take that seriously. I am joined by a slew of lovely guests tonight to talk about a rather serious topic. Medical assistance in death. It's a Canadian policy implemented in, I believe, 2015, which allows people to apply to have the government provide a doctor to help them to die. Previously, until very recently, one of the conditions was that you had to be terminally ill. They have recently rescinded that requirement. And we're going to talk about the ethics of that, the ethics of this policy in particular. Does it help society? Is it a good thing? We're also going to talk about it in the abstract. Is this sort of thing something we want to see in society? Does this help people, or is this simply kind of a gross practice? And we'll get into that. But I want to give everyone here a chance to have an opening statement, introduce themselves, tell people who you are. We have a few new guests today. So, thank you all for being here. And we will start with the man, the myth, the legend, Corey Campbell, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and always grateful to be on a panel and to be invited, and also always grateful to be on a panel with some familiar faces and virtual faces, and some new faces as well. So my overall opening statement is, as a Canadian, I support overall medical assistance in death, and I also support this new provision, but I understand most people's concerns. Most people make the argument that this kind of like opens the floodgates for maybe allowing a certain demographic or people of low socioeconomic status, or they will be disproportionately affected. If you look at the data, that doesn't seem to be the case, and I will leave it there for now. Short.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, we'll get into it as we go. Next up, first time guest on my show. Forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong. Gorps Inc. Is that how you say it?
You got it right. You can call me Gorps. It's quicker and
Gorps it
easier.
is. Well, welcome. Tell
So
people what you think.
overall, I think medically assisted suicide is a good thing. I think it's necessary. I think that Canada's laws are extremely lax and open the door for a lot of abuse and unnecessary assisted suicides. And as there was a UN special reporter on the rights of persons with disabilities, and he said it the best. He said that this law enforces the idea that it's better to be dead than live with a disability, and I find issue in that. So,
Okay, we'll get into it in the open, I'm sure. Next up, another first-time guest on my show, Ice Beans. I'm much more confident about pronouncing your name. Hopefully I got it right. But how are you today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Well, I'm eager to hear your opening statement. What are your thoughts?
So thank you very much for inviting me. This is actually my first sort of serious debate panel. All of the previous panels I've been on, I've been more or less joke panels. But I think that medical assisted dying I think it's a pretty good thing in this, I definitely like the idea of people being able to have the agency to choose the time and place of their death if they essentially, have determined along them with a healthcare professional that there's really nowhere to go from here. However, I do have some concerns, as Gorps pointed out, that if not properly enacted, it could result in people needlessly dying. And it does seem like Canada's policy does seem to be just a little bit rushed.
Okay, we'll get into what that means. I'm sorry, I was muted. We'll get into what that means in the open, I'm sure. Next up, no stranger to my channel, Chris Speaks, please.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think that ending myself is my God-given right as an American, and honestly, right here on the spot, I could probably come up with like fucking 17 reasons just off the top of my head on why I want to partake in self-robloxing and why I might need assistance with doing so. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the expansion of MAID makes perfect sense. You can't really legislate against suicide for obvious reasons, so creating a legal avenue where I don't have to eat myself off a fucking bridge sounds like a great idea. Now, obviously, there are going to be concerns and shortcomings related to this, but when is that ever not the case when we talk about law? And I suppose I'm just looking forward to the back and forth.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. Next time, someone who's been away for a while, but they're back. Ninetales, hello.
Why, hello there. Yeah, it has been a while. How do I sound, by the way?
Good.
Good. Okay. So, yeah, so I am ready to alleviate the fears of people who are worried about how this is going to be handled. We should be more worried about, providing the means of life and a good life to people and asking what a good life is. Because people are already exhausting all the means of treatment. This is already a heavily regulated thing, and experts are telling the government, hey, you got to be more careful with when you do this for mental health reasons. There is no equation to saying that mental health people are better off dead or anything like that. That's hyperbole.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get into the open. Next up, another first-time guest. In Sync, is that how you say your name?
Yeah, that's how you said. So in general, I am in favor of medically assisted suicide. I think that there's obviously some risks around people who have mental health issues or something like that. But even in cases like that, I think in general I'm in favor of like a right to self-determination. If I think as long as for me, there's a condition around, you have to basically have tried, you have to really have tried to make your life better. But if you have tried and you don't want to continue trying, I kind of feel like that's your right.
Interesting. So, just for my viewers out there, I'm very against the concept of this, right? In general, like I understand self-actualization, self-determination. We need to give people the freedom of choice and things like that. But when it comes to the Canadian policy and other government policies, there is a question of coercion on the parts of physicians who would otherwise not want to participate in something like this, being required for mandatory reporting and other things to uh, somewhat participate in this. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing we should kind of look at as well. But I'm curious to hear what you all think, so we're just kind of go into it. So there's a few people here who think this particular policy has some problems. Gorps Inc. was one of them. I'm curious if you'd like to expand upon that a little bit so we can kind of understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so there's multiple issues in the current policy, as well as like on March 1st when they're going to seemingly enact that this is applicable for mental illnesses, which has its own host of issues. But probably the most jarring issue when I first read this for me was that there is no specific requirement that a doctor cannot suggest this. And the idea that a doctor can suggest someone go through with suicide as a treatment is just the opposite of what a doctor should be doing. Death is not a treatment. Death is the opposite of a treatment. So that's one of the most obvious ones, among other things.
We're just going to open it up, so go ahead.
Yeah. So just to clarify, your position is that since there's no like provision or whatever, the law doesn't explicitly state do not recommend. You're under the assumption that then doctors will recommend it like.
I mean, we've already seen cases of them recommending it. I don't care. Like my issue is not like it being recommended.
Can you point to a case,
please? There's a couple news articles. I can see if I can pull them up. I don't have them up right now, but I've seen multiple news articles about it.
I think I'm aware of the news articles that you're referring to, like a certain veteran, but that I wouldn't put that as part of data. A couple of news articles. Generally speaking, on the whole, first of all, doctors also have a Hippocratic oath. Generally speaking, and like they're trained.
I just wanted to say that was the first thing that came to my mind is all doctors swear an oath first, do no harm.
And so, and also I'm pretty sure, I'm hoping, I don't know for sure, but I'm hoping most, if not the vast majority of physicians, like go into the practice of medicine to hopefully, like, at least save lives, improve lives. And even when you poll, physicians themselves on their support for medical assistance in dying, it's not like you see them disavowing it. Like there's actually some pretty reasonable support among physicians themselves, and so like that. Yeah, go ahead, Ninetales.
If I may ask them a question, what is your position on like for physical ailments then? Because that could also be manipulated, right? Are you just as worried about that, or is this is displaced? Because again, these things are being addressed with how they're being handled differently. In fact, I think Bill C7 changed the way that physical ailments are handled by taking off restrictions, but those restrictions do apply to seeking medically assisted dying when it's for a mental disorder.
Is that to me?
Yes. I'm sorry. I got to switch windows and stuff to see names. Group sync, yeah.
You're good. Yeah, so I'm not specifically talking about mental illness when I talk about the issues with this. I think that just alone, having this availability for mental illness is an issue for me. But this still applies to everything in that, especially the statement I just made, where if a doctor legally can suggest this, that is ethically very wrong. It doesn't matter if it's just like one or two doctors doing it. One or two doctors is one or two too many, right? There should be provisions within this that says you can't suggest this. It has to be.
I don't think your priorities fall in line with care of the patient, to be honest. Because what you said stood out to me, because there are clearly way more people who are suffering needlessly that we can't help, that don't have a good life, and they have no autonomy in this issue because the system doesn't recognize their suffering because it's mental health. And so, particularly speaking, we have we have to be sure to consider it as like, this is a remedy for people who otherwise we're condemning to suffering, not the other way around.
I'm curious, for those of you who support this policy in Canada, right? Like, and specifically for doctors being able to recommend this as a treatment, right? Because that seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to be your issue with this, Gorps. Is that true?
One of them, yeah, but that was like my first issue.
Can I just ask? Because, like, to me, like, this idea of a doctor recommending it as a quote-unquote treatment is it's like almost like an absurd hypothetical. Like, I'm imagining the most a doctor would do is say, this is an option for you. That's what I imagine a doctor would do.
Also, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I have zero data to back this up at all, but I feel like it would almost be the other way around, where the patient is the one bringing the possibility up rather than
Almost certainly,
the doctor.
yeah.
Well, I spins that's what I like. Like I would like that to be the case, among other changes to this law. But this law doesn't say that has to be the case.
But we've also had we've had assisted dying for so long now, and that just hasn't happened.
I mean, I can send you cases of this happening.
I was just wanting to
I can send you more cases of it not happening.
Right, hold on. So, because instead of doing like a weird fucking dick measurement contest on how many cases we can each throw at the other person, right? How about we take like a more holistic look at what Gorps is saying, right? And how this relates. So, I sympathize with the point, right? But the problem that you have is that like that level of coercion is always present when it comes to interacting with medical professionals. Like, statistics, at least in my understanding currently, don't really back up that as like a reasonable fear that we have. What was it in 2021? MAID was responsible for 3.4%, I think, of the overall deaths in Canada, and out of that number as a whole, less than 2.2% have been requested by people who suffer from anything else than a terminal condition. So the question I would ask myself really when it comes to something like this, first of all, we will be able to find anecdotes of this being sort of recommended in a situation where that might perhaps not be the best idea. You will always be able to find anecdotes like that. But generally speaking, if we want to go into the ethics of this, what is more ethical or what is less ethical? Suggesting that somebody with a chronic mental or just a chronic condition might want to medically assisted suicide, or that they have to live the rest of their lives with that condition, or to try and do it their own way.
I would say that the most ethical thing would be that the doctor continues trying every possible treatment. That's another issue with this law, is that you are not required to try every possible treatment before you choose mate, right? You can choose mate if you determine.
Wait, one at a time. Let Chris respond, and InSync, you can be right after. So Chris, respond, InSync, then Ninetales.
Yeah, it's just like I understand where you're coming from when it comes to like trying every way to help any given person, but the problem is that is like incredibly utopian. Like the fact of the matter is that some people are just riddled with conditions that will not be cured, that we don't have a feasible way of curing, and telling them that you either have to suffer through the rest of your existence whilst I poke and prod to try and fix you, or that you have to find the nearest bridge and do it yourself, just sounds kind of inhumane. I'd rather have a legally available way of ending my suffering than have to do it like sort of my own way, so to speak.
But why should the state be able to sanction... Sorry, you were up. Go on, InSync.
No, you're good. I forgot exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay.
Gorp, you can take a spot.
Why should the state be able to sanction someone's death? Shouldn't the state's priority be the lives of its citizens?
Well,
this is on
just one any given thing, but the reason why they should be able to sanction someone's death is because you can't legislate against suicide, so you might as well make a legal avenue where people can do this without any risks associated with this.
No, I'm going to step in, Chris. Stop. Okay.
Wait, no, I'm in line for
I
one
understand
thing.
you're in line, but I'm going to respond.
I want to respond.
And you go exactly next, exactly after me.
Wait, hold on, Wick. If you're going to issue a challenge, okay, it's going to be a 1v1, buddy, so everyone else has to stay in the queue, right? Fucking come at me, bro.
So, this whole thing, well, legislation won't entirely stop it, so we shouldn't have any legislation about it at all. It's kind of bunk, right? We can't.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's
right?
no,
what
it's
are you
not
saying? Please
it's
clarify.
the same. If I was to use a different example of something that is kind of like, it's not really in the same ballpark, but legally it makes sense to use it as an example, it's abortion. If there is no legal way to have an abortion, people have them illegally, and that creates a slew of issues that accompany that. So it makes no sense to try and not legislate it, because why would you want to increase the odds of this happening in an unsafe manner that can get other people involved?
Well, what we want to do, at least what I think we want to do, is reduce the incidence of suicides overall, right? We don't want this to happen as much as it is. And
well,
I can understand your argument.
Right?
Here. I can just real quick, I can understand your argument here that we want to provide people a way especially who have terminal illnesses, right? Like to safely exit. But I think the incentive structures when it comes to making this kind of especially in Canada, which is a capitalistic system, the incentive structures at play here, there's some problems, gang. There's some problems. I think Gorps is only hitting on one of them, but there's others as well at play.
Yeah, but then the problem that you have at that point, Wick, if I'll just say one last thing and I'll shut up because I know I'm taking up a lot of the the room. If your concern is with like the capitalistic outlook and the fact that like this can delve into something worse or something like that much that bad, then you can look at the Netherlands that has been doing the exact same thing for the past 20 years, and the statistics available on the topic do not validate your current concerns.
Also, isn't it hilarious that the American in here is like, oh, I'm worried about Canada's financial problems with healthcare. It's like, I'm sorry, you little ground to stand on there, but I'm just kidding. But if you have any serious ones, bring them up. I do want to say, though, that somebody said that the role of the state is to protect lives. I don't, like, for people who think that's true, fine, debating that, probably comes into, like, historical texts and stuff like that, so I don't want to get into that. But we should be focusing on quality of life, not sanctity of life.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I just wanted to, I'm stepping a little back, but I did remember what I wanted to say, because, Gorps, to me, like, obviously, yes, the doctor, should, and I think, in general will, sort of try and pursue all avenues that will promote the health of a patient, right? But like in my mind, the patient has a right to know that what their options are, even if the doctor doesn't think it's a good idea. The fact that it's an option, right? So that's not a suggestion in my mind saying, by the way, this is an option that you have that you could do. Yeah, I don't see that as unethical at all, to be honest.
To me, that's very...
A reason... Can I quickly...
Yeah,
I just
go
wanted
for
to
it.
say something I forgot last time. A reason that the restrictions on, like, exhausting all options aren't as, like, tight for mental health stuff, and I did have to remember this, is because whether or not something is curable or incurable with mental health is not even known in a lot of cases. We don't know what the effective treatments are. We have to listen to the patient as to what's been effective and stuff like that. And that's actually that thing I posted in the Discord group DM. It particularly talks about how that the uncertainty of that person's future is very much causes them a lot of suffering. And as a trans person, I can relate, because if I lose my hormones, my future is very uncertain, and that's very distressing.
No, I can understand the distress. I know that Ice wanted to get in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let her get in. And
Wick, I don't have
Corey.
access to the group DMs. Just want to put it out there. If I click to show chat, nothing happens. It's a permission thing.
I don't know what I don't know what's wrong there. I think everyone else has access to it. I don't know.
Boomer.
So here's the order we're going to do. We're going to go to Ice Beans. We're going to go to Corey, and then Gorp, you're being challenged, so I'm going to let you respond too. And if people directly challenge you, you could just jump in and respond this one. Go ahead, Ice Beans.
So I was going to say that my major concern with this is, again, not the ethical thing, but more so like how this is being rolled out. And it's not so much of a concern as it is what are the steps in order to be taken to get everyone prepared for this and have those steps been taken. And so far what I'm seeing is like kind of a maybe. Like that's what I essentially want to get clarification on. But
Well, we already... Yeah,
you got to let
us finish, if I may. That actually was done. I was just...
No. In response to this point, though, I'm interested to know, Wick, what your concern is regarding like the sort of the financial or capitalistic incentive, because that doesn't seem like, what are you concerned about specifically? That people would make a profit off of this?
Yeah, I find that idea very strange, because obviously, like, your customer's dead after that.
Yes, but you can look, when it comes to making money, capitalism is very good at making money, right? And creating structures that do making money, right? Like for itself, right? For the system, if you will. My concerns when it comes to medically assisted suicide and death are both the coercive effect on the doctors and physicians who may not want to be participating in that.
Chat's saying that you're muted. Right? I don't know if that is...
It is. I am muted because I suck at streaming, gang. I am sorry. Okay, to my audience. So let me try this again. Okay. So my main issue when it comes specifically to the capitalistic incentives that come across when you put these things in place is you have to, if you have different psychiatrists, therapists, and other people who are going through this process that have to approve these processes and things like that, they're going to want to get customers, right? They're going to want to advertise this. We could look at if you Google, I don't know if this is a meme, but you can find out the hotline and things. You're going to be referred to these customers. It's going to be a pipeline. And yes, eventually they will die, right? Your customers will go away, but there's always going to be a poor kind of people who are suffering and struggling. And that's, I think, going to be the group that gets hurt by this the most in the long term. Now, we may not see that right now, but I think given a few years, that is a concern that I don't think we could just brush to the side. Anyway,
just to be super clear, Wick, are you finally joining me as a socialist? Is that what's happening?
I am a capitalist, but I get drunk on weekends and get a little socialist curious. So I'm not a pure capitalist.
You can't tell when a country has socialist medicine. That's the problem here. But in general, like the only kind of specialists that the legislation seems to call for are specialists within that person's condition. And those specialists could also work outside of medically assisted dying. There are specialists who can be consulted for the purposes of like someone's caretaker figuring out what the best options are. But the key thing is informed consent. You can mitigate all of this by making sure the person who's seeking this option is informed and is able to say yes or no with the full capacity that they need. That's why that thing that I posted gets deep into capacity, because you have to. It basically says if you don't know if someone has the capacity or if you don't know if this is the right treatment or not, you basically don't do it. Only when it's certain should you really go with this.
Yeah, and I think that part is a good thing. Also, sorry, this is a side note for what Wick said, and I think Corey, you might have the best answer for this. Is the MAID program free to customers or is it not?
Yes, as far as I know, like it is.
So the problem.
Customers, but
No,
not
okay.
you.
They're not
Do you not think
customers.
they're doing this for free, right? Like the government
They're
is
not
is
customers because MAID's not a product. So
Okay.
it depends on the specialist and whether or not they're covered by our plans, right? Basically they're usually provincial. Not all specialists are, and if they're not, there'd have to be another program to fund it. And I don't think that there are many programs that specifically cover anything to do with medically assisted dying. So I'm going to say no. But again, you don't need people who are dying to be a specialist in the field to do with the disease, right?
certainly not. But my concern here is that it's not that they're going to be fleecing the poor for money here. It's that they're going to be subsidized by the government, and because they much like
For
Elon
what?
Musk, Tesla, and other things receives government subsidies in order to stay afloat and keep going. Like
Nobody's
government
receiving
programs.
subsidies, so there's no
So
reason
they do
to.
it for free. These doctors do it for free. They just help people die for free.
No, they
There's
do doctor
no
stuff.
financial
They
incentive.
do doctor stuff. They do get paid for being
but
a
doctors
doctor.
don't get paid, right? In Canada.
This is.
I'm not Canadian, so maybe I'm wrong. But
the exact same arguments apply to like getting vaccinated. Like, yeah, any doctor could be subsidized for providing vaccines to their patient.
but vaccines don't
that's
kill their patients.
arguably. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to get into that. Don't disregard that I joked there. But the thing is like again, this is a last available means, and nobody's treating it as anything else. Those doctors have to like go through all those other options first. They have to work with this patient, and it even like these experts that wrote this thing, which this law is based around, by the way. They said you specifically have to make sure doctors don't feel impartial to this process. Like they don't feel like the patient either has to die or that they don't have to die. Otherwise, they should leave. And I feel like a lot of doctors are probably going to do that if that's the case, because that's probably part of their ethical imperative.
I was going to say that as well, Wick. A couple of times when you brought up this question of, doctors being coerced into participating or whatever. Like, presumably, if you would have to find a physician who is willing to do it. Like they couldn't force you to do something you think is unethical.
So
It
in
would
reading the
essentially-
law, in reading the I'm sorry, not the law, the program, the policy. I'm not sure what to call it exactly. There is a mandatory reporting thing, so the doctors have to make the patient aware of these things.
No, it's just they just have to
Well,
report if their patient requests it,
Yeah,
but they're not required
Exactly,
to
yeah,
go
yeah.
through with the process.
Yes, but they
Also,
have.
Yeah.
That is a
Mandatory-
form of participation, is it not?
that's not the same
No,
thing.
Well, yeah,
not
but to a certain
necessarily.
extent,
Wait,
to a certain
not
extent, Wick.
necessarily. Not necessarily, because mandatory reporting could, reporting that someone has requested suicide could end up just funneling them through to services that treat some underlying condition they've
Exactly.
got, and they end up not wanting to kill themselves.
Or it could lead to their death, and physicians who do not want to risk that at all are still required.
All this law does is makes it
Obviously-
legal to do that. It doesn't create any imperative for them to do it. I'm telling you right now.
I think it's. I mean, there's already mandatory reporting on things like someone wanting to kill themselves. If a physician or whatever, if you communicate to a physician that you want to kill yourself, that they have a responsibility to refer you to a mental health professional.
Certainly, but that's how it works in America, at least. But in this system, right, when I say mandatory reporting, they have to make people. They may have to start them on the process by making others aware that they want this process to begin, right? And that's what I think becomes the coercive
whole
factor.
thing though is that. But the process, though, is essentially a process of them having to jump through a million, hoops in order to demonstrate that they've tried all other options. Essentially, like like in terms of like starting the process is quite a laborious thing. It's
And
not
again,
like,
can I go after him though, please?
yeah.
Well, we have Corey
Yeah, I
in
was just gonna
line
say,
too.
I would like to go in line as well.
And Chris.
Well, I do want to tie this back to something that applies to
Can you be
myself.
brief?
Just really, yes. So just in regards, like this, you could say the same thing about trans surgeries and stuff like that, and there are safeguards in place to prevent that. But the only difference is, like you said, one's killing the patient, and the argument then all we have to do is examine that this is a quality of life issue and ensuring that they have a good life, and not just their sanctity of life, and then forcing them into a prison of suffering.
I don't think helping people not want to commit suicide is forcing them into a prison of suffering. I'm sorry. Corey, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to address the point that you made in expressing that concern or the future concern of like, this will result in, disproportionately, people of low socioeconomic status, getting assistance in death. If the data does not support that, as in like, I'll link it both in the Twitch chat and the group chat, like disproportionately, the demographics of people who are receiving medical assistance in death tend to come from like higher socioeconomic status, and that holds across actually the different countries that have it that have made it legal, such as like the Netherlands, Belgium. Like disproportionately, it's consistently people of higher socioeconomic status, and so like that as of now, that is not a concern. As in like generally speaking, those who are on lower socioeconomic status are like underserved and don't have the best access to medical care, and so technically, even if they want it, they're not in the best position to get it, even if they want it.
Chris,
I
you
thought
wanna-
Yeah, am I right to jump in?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was
You
going to
guys
say
are
that
also
like.
polite. You can be a little
Right,
more.
okay, I'll start calling people names in just a sec, okay? Let me get warmed up a little bit. Right, so Netherlands have had something very similar to this for like 2 decades now, and the concern that you have just doesn't happen. Like, it's just not a concern. And also, parts of what you're talking about doesn't make sense to me. So if it's mandatory for doctors to inform the patient, and you no longer need to have a chronic illness to have this service, then are you saying that doctors will now recommend medically assisted death for everything? Like, you just rock up in there with a headache, and the guy goes like, do you want paracetamol, Medicaid to fucking kill yourself? Like, how that makes no sense, right? Like, how would that work? The concern we have is that you no longer need to be chronic for this to be a recommendation, and you're saying that they have to recommend it. So do they have to recommend it to everyone, or would you say that through having
No, it's not. When you say
responsibility of a
mandatory
doctor?
reporting, you're
Yeah,
misunderstanding.
he didn't say
Mandatory reporting is not mandatory recommendation. Mandatory reporting, if a patient comes into your office and says, "Hey, I would like to be served by this program," right? Then even if you do not want to participate in this program whatsoever, you are mandated to pass that along to pass it up the chain, basically.
May I ask for something?
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. Based off of the data so far, like the average age of people receiving medical assistance death is like over 70. So it's not like you're having like a huge epidemic of young people in poverty. Go ahead.
I want to
may I
jump in
address
after you as well. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks. Just like with what we're saying with whether or not this applies to people who face systemic barriers, there is a problem. I'm not going to totally agree with the person to my right whose name is I'm blanking on. There is a problem with like misdiagnosing things that are really elements of what is called structural violence or structural barriers. I've been recently like denied treatment as a trans person because I wasn't able to make my appointments because of structural barriers, because there's a high demand for that. And that's been really hard on me, but I'm getting through it, so don't worry about me. Anyways, the point is that the way we address this, though, is by making doctors more aware of it. In fact, the people, I forget what the name for them is, but there are people who they are recommending who sign off on this, who like agree or disagree. They're not going to be paid based on whether or not they agree or disagree on whether or not this person should die. They're just an independent, outside third party to decide on it. And so the important thing is that those people go, as the thing recommends, those people go through regular training to make sure that they recognize these barriers. And they even bring up barriers for race, barriers for people who don't fit normative categories, including people who can't make appointments. So I really think they are trying to cover all their bases, at least the experts are. And if we find that politicians aren't listening to these experts in further legislation that they pass, we should put pressure on them to refer back to these papers, because ultimately I'm going to have to find an advocacy group that will say to this clinic, hey, either you listen to what all the experts are saying that you're doing to this trans woman for no good reason, because I haven't done anything wrong, or this person's going to have to seek legal action. And that's not fair to me, but there is options for me, and I think that's the important thing. And I think the law clearly states that, like, no matter what, a person has the entitlement to say no. So a doctor can never say, you're too sick, just die. They can always say no.
Certainly. So, Corey, just to address this real quick, in the study you mentioned, out of, it looks like, I want to say a little under 400 here that they studied, 166 of them were poor, classified as poor. Not middle class, not rich, not anything like that, poor, right? Yeah. That's a significant percentage. I don't know what you're getting off saying that, it's mostly not poor people. True, but there's a significant percentage who are.
That's why I also brought in the fact that, like, the average age is, like, over 70.
That's true.
Where it's like, it does not, and the most common reason for applying for it appears to be, like, cancer. I think it's like roughly 2/3 is for cancer. So it's not like, at least, sure, you can cite that demographic, but it does not seem like the primary reason.
Looking at the total cohort, I'm looking at your study right now. Over half of them were over 75, but over half, the other half were under 75, and it doesn't give me good statistics on how. It doesn't give an average age. It just says most were over 75.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, first of all, like, I'm not saying that no one from, lower socioeconomic status, like, doesn't receive it. But also, like, that.
I'm talking about the age now, right? Like,
fair enough.
So again, a significant portion, right? So it's like, I want to say 55%. Yeah, they were over 75, but that means 45% weren't. But we don't know from the study you linked, right? Yeah. We don't have data on whether they were 16, 20, 40, I don't know, right?
There's not a disproportionate problem of it being used by youth, are there? We can safely say that that's probably not the case if that's not being reflected.
I don't think.
I mean, but we can also. We can also.
I want Corp to go.
Okay, I have multiple things here. First, to Ninetales, we can also pretty easily assume, right, that when this opens up for mental illness, we will see a lot more young people, because mental illness is disproportionately affecting young people. So we can, I think that it's reasonable to assume that on March 1st and beyond, we're going to see a shift in the age ranges going on here. Second of all, Chris and Corey, and I think Ninetales, maybe not though, you all mentioned things about Netherlands and how their system works. The issue with that is that their system is much more restrictive. Their system is one that I would support. The issue is that the Canadian system is so much more lax, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Canadian system, not the Netherlands system.
It really isn't. And if I can quickly point, sorry, can you quickly just tell me the first point? I have to go quickly walk away, so my brain got distracted. What was your, just really brief?
So we're going to see a lot more younger people.
When it opens up to mental illness.
Yeah, so I think we have to realize that with the restrictions that are in place, like having to seek all other means, that is going to limit
that's not a restriction in place. That is not the legal restriction in place.
You realize that it takes a long time to go through every available option, right? That doesn't just happen overnight. And you have to see what the response is, so that takes even longer.
What he's saying, Ninetales, is that he's not, and this is his claim, I don't know this is true, right? I want to be clear, I don't know if what he's saying is right or correct, but what he is saying is what you are saying is a legal restriction is not an actual legal restriction in the policy.
Yeah, and I can add on to that you're supposed to have, you're supposed to have, 2 practitioners that agree that MAID is the correct option for you. Is that right?
That's only for the mental health cases now, yes.
Okay, well, it also doesn't say that if you have 5 doctors say, no, this isn't right for you, and 2 say yes, it doesn't say that then you cannot get it. Like, you would still be able to get it, even if 5 doctors are saying, this is not possible.
The ethical guide, the care that doctors use, if you actually look at this from the way doctors are trained, they can't just say, oh yes, this is fine because I'm not sure. They have to say, yes, I am sure that this is the
Well, not just
ethical
that.
option.
Well, not
And
just
so
that,
that,
but-
what you're doing right now is you're taking a layman's approach to this, but I'm telling you right now, this is easier said than done, especially if you're a doctor.
NSYNC, go ahead.
I'm so confused. Yeah, because it's like you're saying, like, what would happen if like 5 doctors say this isn't right for you? That isn't something a doctor does. A doctor does not decide what is right for you. You as a
What?
patient.
What?
You as
No,
as a patient decide. The doctor.
Are you any of you familiar with the opioid crisis in America and how that went through or forward?
Yeah, but
No,
the
no,
problem
no.
is, the problem is that
Instinct.
as much as I sympathize with what you're saying, you look at doctors with like the most doomer American lens imaginable. It's like in your mind they're like walking fucking robots of destruction that just seek the way to capitalize their gains while killing as many people as humanly possible and getting the rest of us addicted on opioids so they can keep fucking pumping the engine of capitalism.
It didn't take
That's-
all the
shit just doesn't
doctors to
happen.
engage in that. It took a minority of doctors to engage in that to create the crisis we're facing
Wick,
today.
the fundamental difference that you have here is that killing yourself is something that is currently on the table. Like you can
Sorry, I feel like
find a bridge and jump off of it. What we're talking about here is making it so that you have a way of doing this legally. If you have come to a conclusion that you want to end yourself, then you can have an assistant in going through with it instead of going to the doctors to get help, being told there's fuck all they can do about it and being told to leave.
Yeah.
And
and
think
also,
over
Wait,
that.
legally and compassionately. I want to just add that. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
think,
sure.
finish your point. I want you to be able to get in. And then I know Ice Beans wants to get into this, so I'm going to try to get here. So, NSYNC, make your point. No one interrupt him,
I feel
and then we'll go to Ice
I
Beans.
feel like what I said really wasn't understood. What I'm saying is, what a doctor does is a doctor tells you, like if a doctor says no to a treatment option, what they're telling you is, I'm not comfortable doing this for you. They're not saying you can't do this, right? It's always an option for you to go and find a doctor who is comfortable doing some kind of procedure. It's never the case that a doctor decides for a patient what the treatment will be. A doctor is supposed to tell you what your options are, educate you about your options, and help you to make an informed decision about what to do with in relation to your health. That's the goal of a doctor. The doctor is never supposed to decide for you, ever.
But the
Can I-
doctors do recommend to you a course of treatment, saying, I
Yes,
think
but-
this will be
yes,
the
of
best way
course.
forward.
Naturally,
can I
yes,
butt
but
in real
this
quick?
notion of a doctor ever recommending suicide is absurd. Like the Hippocratic Oath just makes that very implausible.
Go ahead, Gorps.
Wick,
So-
Gorps, can I just ask you a question, Wick?
Well, sure, Gorps,
Yeah.
questions, and Ice Beans, because Ice Beans is waiting super patiently.
Okay, so in sync, what we were talking about was that you need something like 2 doctors to approve you to be able to go through the MAID program. So if you have 5 doctors that say, no, I don't think you fit the qualifications, and then 2 that say, go for it, why do those 5 doctors just get disregarded, while those 2 doctors, who are the minority, are like, everyone just has to go with, yeah, they're right, but everyone else is wrong?
Okay.
It's like, this is the thing is, the way we usually deal with this is personal accountability of the doctors. It's like, okay, what if doctors do an unethical procedure, any other procedure, right? What happens is that they end up losing their medical license. So, like, there's repercussions because they abused that position, because they made a decision that most other doctors wouldn't agree with. They stop getting the right to be a doctor. That happens.
How are you going to catch them if the victim in the situation is dead? How do you go back and say, no, this was wrong?
They do that all the time in reviews.
There is extensive review processes associated with a situation where anyone dies.
Do we have 10,000
I
reviews
just find
every year in Canada? Because in 2021, there was 10,000 people who who went through the MAIDS program.
Well, presumably they were reviewed by medical professionals and doctors.
Yeah,
That's why they got approved to begin with. That's also
so-
part
No,
of the
but what I'm saying is every single case of this after the death gone back and reviewed?
Yes, there's a coroner's review. Yes.
Do you think a coroner review thinks, oh, well, this person is suicidal, so we really, they made the right call there? Do you think that's how that
But
works?
generally, coroner's reviews are very sophisticated in terms of analyzing whether or not the treating physicians are making the correct decisions. The whole point is to reform the healthcare system if there's problems in the way
But
people
that's when it comes to treating illnesses, right? Treating specifically physical illnesses, right?
But why do you think the ethical standards would just suddenly relax? Because it's like to me, there's even more of a burden. We're going to feel even more the gravity of what we're doing if what we're doing is deciding.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Ask your question, and Ice Beans is next.
Okay, that was a question to begin with. Okay, there is more now because more has been said since then. So I think Ice Beans can just go now, and I'll go in a second.
Yeah, because all I want to say, I want to basically say two things. Really, if you want data, Rick, we should probably be looking at the Netherlands instead of anywhere else, really, because they would probably have more data. I did find this. I put it in the chat. I haven't looked at it too closely yet, but maybe you'll be able to find something there. But in let me get back to my other point. Okay, so the other thing that's sort of related to everything that you're saying is that there's this movement to try to like essentially separate the two, where it's not called a suicide anymore, because really it's not just about like killing yourself. It's about like, okay, going out in a way that's dignified, has respect, does not like, it doesn't have all of the negative connotations that like a straight up suicide does. So I think that I don't think that this sort of thing is just going to be like, okay, as soon as it's approved, all right, it's done. Like this person is killed, right?
To be clear to you, Ice Beans, like my issue is different than Gorp's issue. My issue is I don't think this is ethical at all in any capacity. I think outside of terminal illnesses, and I'm talking terminal illnesses with like a 6-month span or maybe a year span, right? Like if you know you're going to die in a year, okay, I'll make allowances for that. But I think that the ethical
never known though
of things like the societal impact of making this thing a government sanctioned, I think it is just negative. That's my main point.
That brings up an interesting question for me, because like, what about the ethical question of, and this was already brought up, like if you don't provide some legal avenue, people do it themselves, and we know what happens when people try to kill themselves. Overwhelmingly,
we do actually. Let's get some data. Have you ever read the book? It's called The View from Halfway Down. We know from that view and from stories of people who have tried to commit suicide and by actually jumping off bridges and actually going through with it. Most of them regret it.
I know.
They regret it.
But Vic, this is why I brought up. This is why I brought up my point, though. This
quickly, because I want to talk about the other half. Not the question, because I know I'm familiar with what you're talking about with the idea that they regret it. But more importantly, most of the time they don't succeed, and what they do succeed in doing is fucking themselves up badly. That's what they mostly succeed in doing when they try to kill themselves.
Sure. Look, I want to reduce the attempt, right? I want to reduce the attempt rate all across the board. But the problem with medically assisted suicide is there is no failure rate. There is no failure rate. Like, we don't have data on whether they'll regret it or not because it's medically assisted, it's professionally done.
We do have data of people. We have data of people who drop out of this before they proceed through with it.
That's not failing it, though.
No, but what you're talking about is no, hold on. But what you're talking about is a fundamentally different demographic. People who decide to jump off a bridge and people who would go through getting 2 doctors to approve a dignified way of going out is fundamentally different.
Do you think these people no, it is not. These people who jump off the bridge, absolutely not.
Are you telling me? Hold on. Are you telling me that everyone would jump off the bridge?
No. Therapy? You didn't think they go through years of therapy and years of medication?
Can I just get that as a quote from you? Are you telling me that everyone, in that case, in your worldview, who is trying to I haven't finished my sentence. You don't know what the everyone reference is because you haven't even heard what I've said yet. Are you saying that in your hold on? Are you saying that in your worldview, everyone who currently goes off and tries committing suicide by jumping off a bridge would apply for this new way of doing this legally? Is that what you're saying?
Of course not.
So do you think that there's a fundamental difference in the demographic that we're talking about?
Of course not, right?
You guys are talking past each other. Come on. Like, what Wick was saying is that there's overlap, that there is some of the demographic is the same, that there are some people who currently manually try to kill themselves who would try to go get an assisted suicide. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, but that makes no sense. Hold on. Do you think, in what situation do you think you're more likely to say, well, actually, in what situation do you think you're safer when you decide that you don't want to go through with it? Is it in controlled setting when you can say, like, actually, hold on, I've changed my mind? Or is it when you're dangling off a fucking bridge?
You're not dangling.
I think the point is, like, that, you get an opportunity, like, if, let's say, you don't die, you get an opportunity there to have second thoughts, because you only get the second thoughts once you've actually taken the plunge. Wick is saying, like, there is no after you've taken the plunge. Although, actually, I think that's a good thing. I think the fact that it doesn't fail is actually a very good thing. Because, like I was saying, like, failing to kill yourself essentially means fucking yourself up badly. That's generally...
Yeah, but the problem is that we wouldn't let this stand on principle with so many other issues.
I mean, this is why we have that, like, this is why ideally we would have that process beforehand to make sure that this is the right situation. It's not just someone like snap thinking. It's not even like a case where they're in a depressive funk for like 2 months and they play, like, you know, or ordinarily if they didn't have this option, they would have like planned out their death. Okay, I'm gonna kill myself 2 months from now, right? It's not even that. It's like this is like presumably a step-by-step process whereby multiple people determine that this is probably the best way to go. Here's a legal way to do it so that it doesn't fuck you up and fuck up your the lives of your like family and shit.
My problem here again is that the people who actually go through with this, at least, and then fail to see it through. Like, we're not talking about people who get halfway to the bridge and turn around and say, "Oh man, yeah, I was thinking really wrong there," right? Like, we're talking about the people who actually took that step off that ledge. The people who would go to these through this process, and sure, they would be funneled through this system and get to the final solution. They're getting the needles in their arms and stuff like that. But once that medicine goes in, it's done, gang. You're out. There's no second thought.
Address that, because you're conflating, to Chris's point, you're conflating suicide. It's not medical assistance in suicide. It's medical assistance in death.
It's suicide. Yes.
Suicide
it is suicide. It's a form of suicide. That's
there's a reason. First of all,
overlap is different. That's what he means.
Yeah, because again, if you look at the data, the vast majority of people who apply for this, they are in palliative care. Do you think the majority of people who commit suicide are already in palliative care for a long time?
It is still suicide.
It is a huge minority. I'm not done my point. Where it's like, it's not suicide. It's explicitly not suicide. And I'm still not done my point. Please. So, like, can I get my point out, please?
I feel like you haven't explained why it's not suicide, though. That's the thing I'm confused about.
Because that's why I asked the question. Do you think people who are suicidal and who commit suicide the way Wick describes, of whatever, jumping off a bridge, or can I finish my point, please?
Yeah, that was a question, right? Was that not?
You were not letting me speak. Do you not know how to let someone
finish
speak?
your point, Corey?
Yeah, that's the question.
Do you know anything about?
Okay, NSYNC, you gotta let him finish. I promise you. Gotta let Corey finish. You can answer all his questions after. Go ahead.
If you know about palliative care and what palliative care is designed for, okay, that's why it does not overlap with suicide. You know, people in palliative care, these are not the ones that are like going to impulsively commit suicide. They are looking for medical assistance in death. That's why it matters, and that's why you're conflating two separate issues.
Okay,
medical assistance in death. I'm still not done. Can I finish the sentence, please? This is how dialogue and conversation should work. So yes, palliative care, and to Chris's point, these are separate issues and separate demographics.
So, like, I mean, from my understanding, at least, that's not how words are defined. Suicide describes a function, doing something, namely taking your own life. If you ask someone else to assist you in suicide, it is assisted suicide. I mean, that's just what the word means. I don't know.
Instinct. Is there a difference between murder and being a soldier and killing someone in a line of duty?
They're both killing.
Yeah,
you're killing
right.
them.
I'm not asking if they're both killing. Okay, obviously they're both killing. Fucking thank you, Wick. I appreciate that little fucking input of knowledge right there.
I'm asking if there's a difference. Obviously, that's how words work. That's his point.
Holy fucking shit, my worldview is different now because in both you die. Yes, I know. I'm asking if there's a difference, though. If there's a fundamental difference between the two. Obviously, there's an overlap, but is there a difference?
And I think yes, and I can answer that. Like, the difference is a murder is unjustified killing. And in a war, we consider defending your country a good justification.
Right, so there is a difference. That's what I was getting at, right? So, like, just think of that there is a difference between two things that end up with the same outcome, i.e. death in this case, but they are different.
Yes. My point, though, was that we don't define the meaning of a word
based on the kind of a demographic of a people who would engage in it.
Okay, this
But
is
we
a
do
little bit
define a
semantics.
word. We do define a word by. I mean, essentially, the
She
use
said
of the
do-do.
word is like there's more. There's more to it than just killing yourself, right?
Sure,
Well, that's
but at the end of the
cultural
day,
thread.
but at the
I mean,
end of the day, they both end up committing suicide. There could be different processes involved,
suicide-
different types, different ways of doing
yes,
it, whether it's assisted or not. But at the end of the day,
No, but I mean, just quickly though, like side, that's killing. Sewer is self-killing. That's what the word means.
yes, that's what it technically means. But what we use it to mean, we attach a lot more like meaning to it than that. We usually associate it with people who are in a low point of their life, usually untreated mental illness or something like that. Like there's more to it than just killing yourself. And
Is the colloquial
I think
understanding, right? That's what you're talking about. Like the colloquial understanding
Yes,
of killing
the co-
yourself is fundamentally
exactly.
different than what we're talking about here.
and this is different. Like when somebody requests to die, like medical assistance in dying, they're usually, I'm not saying it's always the case, but they're usually not in a place where it's like, oh, I'm just like, I have no options, I'm just going to kill myself.
Sure,
Like,
I understand what you're saying, but they are still fundamentally deciding to die, which is killing themselves.
Yes,
I don't know.
but that's why the reason for moving away from the word suicide is to try to differentiate between those people who just feel like they have no options, or people who have decided, okay, this is the best course for me.
okay.
Well, but this was the week.
no,
I want to move away from the what is suicide
Yeah,
thing.
people-
Yeah, that's a TOS.
we're
That's a risky one. Yeah.
But
We're going
those-
in circles with that.
Yes, I just wanna-
I want nine tails.
But Nine Tails.
Can I make one last point quickly? Because
Briefly.
sort of what Wick was saying, the whole point is that the demographic of people who would engage in what we normally call suicide, if this service were available, some subset, and not a small subset of them, would seek out this service. That was what Wick was saying, that there's an overlap. Some of the people who currently just straight try to fucking throw themselves off a bridge, if this were an option, would go and try and get a doctor to sign off on it.
Yep, that's a good summary. I do want Nine
It's
Tails to
wrong,
go.
but yeah.
Nine Tails has been very patient. I want to give her a chance to have her say, and then we will get to Corey, and then Ice Brains, and then Gorps. Cool. Nine Tails, you have the floor.
So yeah, I'm just gonna have to gloss all over that because I don't want to speak for that long. In general, what I'm hearing is a lot of issues that are being used to disregard the whole idea of assisted suicide, saying it's unethical, when there are clearly ways to mitigate problems, such as feeling pressured to do that, or some sort of profit model or something like that. We all agree that there shouldn't be that, and people who bother to inform themselves on how this works, what Canada's bills look like, and what the experts are recommending are the ones who should be talking about what it looks like, not people who only know how to dismiss things because they find issues from it. And let's be clear here, this whole time we've been talking, we've done a much better job talking about the laments of people who aren't suffering terminally, okay? And I do want us to realize that they're like the medical field is giving these people dignity by letting them die a dignified death and by not making them suffer through life just because there is some moralistic notion of the sanctity to life, and we're forgetting their actual quality of life. Like
Okay.
their life isn't trivial, and so we shouldn't trivialize this problem.
I'm not trying to trivialize this problem. I'm trying to take this very seriously. And once again, if someone has a terminal illness, a physical terminal illness like cancer or these things that are untreatable, or even very unlikely to be able to be treatable, I think that having this option open is fine. What I would object to is extending it to non-terminal conditions. I think that's just I think society.
What you said, physical and terminal. Mental disorders aren't always physical, but they can be terminal.
If you only have 6 months or a year to live, fair. But if you're, I don't know what you mean by terminal illness when it comes to like just a mental condition. Otherwise, other than cancer.
Wait. Where would you?
Can I ask? May I please ask one more thing? Then I'll give my time up to other people. Would you say that most people, if not nearly everybody that you know, aside from maybe some fetishes, and let's just count those just for the sake that they might be apples and
I
oranges.
always discount fetishists, but go on.
What the fuck?
Ooh,
Sorry, it's a blow like
cringe.
We love Chris. We love you, Chris, but go on.
but would you say that most people would prefer to not have their life only be suffering?
Well, certainly. Yes, I think that's an easy bullet to bite. Most people don't want their life to be a never-ending cacophony of struggle and suffering. That is
All right.
true.
I'm leaving it there because I said I would, but just,
Okay.
that's something to consider.
Okay, so we have a line. Yeah, go ahead.
Where would you class like Alzheimer's patients on this?
That's a good one. I don't know, right? I don't think it's a terminal illness. It's not going to kill you, but it does make your life significantly worse, right?
There's a capacity issue, to be honest, more than like,
And
a quality
someone
of
who
life.
has also Alzheimer's, I wouldn't consider them sound enough to make this decision, right?
Well, the
And
reason
that's honestly debatable. So
the reason I ask is because it's one of those conditions that can get so bad to the point where people actually, when they are coherent, they do express that desire to die, right? Like the most famous example that I can think of is Terry Pratchett, who was like the strongest advocate for medically assisted death that I know. And he, I don't remember why he wasn't allowed to do it, but he essentially, he pointed to all of the research that was present in the Netherlands and, places and other places in Europe that have this policy. And he actually didn't get a chance to get his medically assisted death. He died of natural causes before he could do that. So, it's anecdote Andy over here for sure, but it's not as simple as like saying, oh, we can only accept this for people who have a set date. Like that doesn't make sense.
And I want to be clear. I'm very uncomfortable with even that, but I make allowance for it because fair enough. I mean, like, I get it. I understand it, right? But when it comes to things like non-terminal mental illnesses, depression, and even severe depression in some cases, like I understand that people's lives, just real quick, I understand that people's lives don't want to be unending suffering, but the solution to that should not be, okay, we'll end your life. Like, oh, you're depressed? Now kill yourself. Should not be the solution. It should be, let's improve society so that they no longer want to end their lives like this.
it's not a solution to their suffering. It's a treatment for somebody who will never have an enjoyable life, who will never be able to have a quality of life.
Reject that concept of they'll never be able to be better.
Easier said than done when you're actually going through that shit.
Rick, what about people who have schizophrenia?
My uncle has schizophrenia, and I will be damned before I let him commit suicide.
Schizophrenia is incurable, and their quality.
Fair enough, but it doesn't make their lives unending suffering. His life isn't unending suffering. He does not want. He is not suicidal. I want to be clear. He is not suicidal.
Okay.
Right?
It might not be, but sometimes it does make their lives unending suffering. Sometimes,
especially with severity.
Seriously, there are some cases of schizophrenia where the person is completely non-functional, a burden to everyone that they will ever meet, incoherent, can't relate to other people, like constantly experiencing fits of paranoia. I can't imagine why you would think that would be a life worth living.
Okay, no, and I have to step in right now. So, quick background, I work with people with disabilities, like that is my job. I help them find employment and all of that stuff. But my company does a wide range of things. The idea, because what you're describing, Insync, is the same way a lot of people describe, like, severely autistic people, right? That is not a reason that they should not be able to have a high quality of life. What they need is resources, right? I have people that I work with.
We can't only provide resources. I agree with you, and like I said, we need
let me finish this. Let me finish this.
Can I go next? Can I please go next?
Yes, you can. Okay. So, like, I work specifically with some people that have no communicative skills, that have very basic, even like motor skills, right? And they still have a high quality of life because they have the resources available to them, right? So providing resources improves quality of life. Providing death does not improve their quality of life. It ends their life.
I never said
This isn't
anything about
demanded.
quality of life.
And
I
this
spoke
this
to
doesn't apply
what
to
kind of quality
neurodivergent.
of life.
It does. That's a disability. This law
No,
made
okay,
the applies
no.
to them.
See, I get you're coming from it as a layman. Let me ground this for a second. So nobody is saying that just because the disability causes suffering that they need to die. Just like nobody's using suicidality as a measurement for how much this is needed. What we're asking is, do they respond to treatments which give them quality of life? Your assumption that anybody with autism, even the most severe autism, will enjoy their life because treatments work for the majority, excludes the minority for whom the treatments don't work. And this is giving dignity to the people who cannot have their suffering relieved. Not autism, by the way. I don't think autism would qualify, but
Yeah,
for whose suffering wouldn't
Disability.
be relieved, and B, who can't respond to the treatments we have available. When we brought up schizophrenia, the one thing we didn't point out is that if your schizophrenia is severe enough, you may not even know what your next day is going to be like. That's an uncertainty most of us, that's a certainty most of us take for granted, that we're just going to wake up and our brain's going to work the same the next day. If somebody doesn't want to live through that, I think it's unethical for us to tell them that they should do that simply for the sanctity of life.
Also,
totally.
saying that like, you know, these autistic people would like not that would qualify, like it's just not the case, right? Because I think one of the eligibility requirements is that you should actually be vocal about saying, I want medical assistance in dying, and they have to be capable of making healthcare decisions.
So
And I feel like that eliminates at least some portion of these the people who qualify. I don't know, not qualify, but who you're talking about.
So there's also provisions that say that you have to make it like as possible for communication, right? So for example, if this person can write or nod or something, that can't count. That is still communication. It's just not complex communication.
I honestly don't see the analogy between autism and schizophrenia. Out of curiosity, do you happen to know anyone with schizophrenia?
But hold on.
I'm taking the
because none of this fucking matters. This is like such a fucking stupid even line that we've gone down. Like nobody gives a flying fuck. Nobody is saying right that everyone who's autistic now has to go through this.
Case by case basis.
As an option. Yes, exactly. Fucking hell. Yeah, everyone knows somebody. Like the idea that we know somebody who's disabled and has a good quality of life, therefore we cannot give people who want to go through this an option to go through this, is just fucking weird.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
What I'm pointing out is that resources increase the quality of life, as well as other treatments and everything, and these should at the very least... Wait. These, bringing back to some of my original points, these should at the very least have to be exhausted before made as an option, which is just not the case under the Canadian law.
Okay, so when you say resources, what exactly do you mean by resources? Because, like, as in, like, I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but do you want, like, if someone's quality of life is affected by their socioeconomic status, do you want them to receive, like, a check to boost their socioeconomic status? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm talking about quality of life relating to the illness. So, resources relating to the illness. So like, for example, I work with people with disabilities, right? We provide housing, education, employment, fun activities, like all these things. Those are all resources.
Well, what do you mean by you provide employment exactly?
We essentially go in to, we talk to the person or their family and we figure out what they would be happy, like what type of work they would be happy in, right? And then we go into a place like that and we basically create a job that doesn't exist, because they usually need more accommodations and stuff. So we create a job that doesn't exist, support them in training, and show up, supervise them, all of that stuff. Make sure laws are followed, things like that.
Though, like, how when you catch somebody who these treatments are, like, isn't responding positively to these treatments, what is there for them? Like, how do you make sure that everybody who is, like, is like the worst case scenario can be caught by this? Because this is a normative model of approaching this. And just going to point something out, neurodivergent people don't fit normative models very well.
I never said they did, right? What I'm saying is that these resources do work. And when
Well,
one
if it
doesn't, you
doesn't
try
work for
another one.
everybody, then this isn't a one size fits all thing, and you can't.
That's what I'm
expect
saying.
nobody-
When it doesn't work, you try a different one.
Thing? Just a bit of a housekeeping
And the
thing,
same goes
Corey?
for
Okay,
like
you finish.
schizophrenia.
I'm
The same
on.
goes with schizophrenia and stuff like that. If somebody has no way out of that, and they say that
There's
this is the
never
only-
no way out. There's never no way out in the case of these things, right?
No, this is your belief. This is a faith you have.
No, your faith, the unfalsifiable claim that there is no way out and there will never be a way out. You just cannot prove that, right? It's unverifiable.
No, but you
right?
can't
And
say
you are
that.
taking
You can't speak
you
for
are
other
making
people.
permanent decisions or allowing permanent decisions
You
to be
can't
made
speak for
what
other
might
people.
very well be temporary problems.
You
Wait,
can't
this
speak
is
for
Right,
other
but the
people,
point is,
and you're
hold on, because
No. This is between me and Wick. You're overestimating what the medical system can do.
No, it's that Wick's point is that you can't say this will never be curable because tomorrow we might discover some fucking alien magic, which obviously we can, but nobody's talking about that this will never be cured. We're talking about that this is like a little, maybe a fucking splash of privilege to say that somebody has to go through the rest of their lives suffering if they have determined that they are, because your sensibilities are offended at the proposition that they might want to go through medically assisted death.
This is why I brought up schizophrenia to begin with, because schizophrenia is one of those conditions that today we have no effective treatment for.
What are you talking about? No, we could definitely treat schizophrenia. If you're on your meds and schizophrenia, almost all of them have much higher quality of life. You're not going to make it go away, but you are going to improve their quality of life significantly.
No, you obviously don't know much about schizophrenia meds.
I could tell you the difference between my uncle when he's on his meds and when he's not on his meds.
Schizophrenia is not the same for every single patient. Like I don't. To Chris, why are we talking about this?
Most
It's hardly the
antipsychotic
same.
medications that you can take that will seriously dampen any kind of psychotic delusions you have also make it quite difficult for you to think and function normally.
But that's not the same as having unending suffering in your life. Just because you are going to have a disability, and yes, it is a disability, right? It is going to make it less likely for you to function as a normal human being would. It
Nobody's
doesn't
equating those
mean
things.
that it's uncurable, untreatable, that we can't do anything about it.
But Wick,
You're conflating
nobody's
these
saying,
things.
fuck, yeah, but this is so
This isn't all or
irrelevant.
nothing.
Yeah, and nobody's saying that your uncle has to go through this. Like, guys, I cannot stress this enough. I speak multiple languages, and in none of them I can construct a sentence that will illustrate how fucking irrelevant what we're talking about right now is. Like, holy fuck.
Okay,
Do we have any other anecdotes that we want to bring into this to decide that we should not go through with some medical fucking change because somebody's
No, these
grandma's
examples,
fucking
you
uncle
say
nephew.
they're irrelevant. You say they're irrelevant, but they're absolutely relevant.
No,
because you
they're
use examples
irrelevant
to
because
illustrate
the reason why
can I
they're
mediate?
irrelevant, Wick, is
If I
because
may mediate.
I'll just explain just to make sure that my position's coming across fucking accurately. The reason why I'm saying it's irrelevant is because nobody's saying that if you have a condition on the Rex, then that equals medically assisted death. The idea of this isn't that you have to go through
Wick.
this.
That isn't what I'm complaining about.
No.
Right?
Okay, I just want to moderate. Okay, so I just want to point out something here because I want to kind of steelman Wick's thing. Wick is coming from a place where he is thinking about this emotionally. He's thinking about his uncle and stuff like that. And a lot of people will think about this relative to I know my mom's going to think about this like me committing suicide or me seeking maid, and she's not going to like it because of that. And we do have to get people to understand that you also don't want your loved ones to suffer to the point where if you truly love them, you just don't want them to suffer, right? And if they're saying to you every moment of my life is suffering, I don't enjoy life at all, there should be some sympathy and some empathy there and some understanding that you want them to die in a dignified way, not through a suicide attempt that they applied themselves at home.
I don't want them to die at all.
Yeah, but the problem is
they're going to die either way.
There are some people who are going to but some people are going to die in a horrible way either way, right?
And what if they never enjoyed their life? Do you really want to prolong their suffering for no good reason?
Here's an interesting question as well, because someone, for example, with schizophrenia, just to continue that example, right? If they don't, let's say,
Triggering Chris today, choosing violence. I love it. Go on.
If they don't get medically assisted suicide or something like that, right, and they feel like their quality of life is so low they can't tell what's real and stuff like that, there's a non-zero probability that the way they die might be in a shootout with police or that they take someone hostage or something like that. That absolutely happens.
Yes, but the chances of that happening, if they're properly treated, go down to almost nothing, right? The same.
You keep talking about proper treatment. The thing about an illness like schizophrenia, Wick, is that the way it works is you don't really believe that you're ill. You stop taking your medication, okay? The amount of schizophrenics who consistently stay on their medication is low. Most schizophrenics have relapses every few months, every few years. That's how the condition works.
Yes.
So can I ask you, Wick?
If I can respond to that real quick, then you can ask me. I want to try to respond one person at a time.
Well, you're not really moderating, and I am trying to moderate. So I just want you to. I want you to
because
concede
no one
one
else
thing.
has my position here, and
I want you. No, I just want you to try. I'm trying to get common ground. So and I see Chris, you have your hand up. Try to admit that at least like for you, your sense of proper treatment may not be applicable to every schizophrenic person out there. There may be people who it doesn't work for, right?
Certainly, some people are more susceptible to the treatments that we currently have than others. Some it will affect better than others. Some will respond better than others. But in no instance do I think that it's okay to process someone to death because they have schizophrenia. I just don't think that's okay.
Okay, Chris?
No, no. The reason why I have the poop stick out is because the entire current line of dialogue is fucking shit.
It's not a hand
Well, your input isn't much better, to be honest.
I honestly forget what NC acts, which is why I wish people would stop interrupting me when I'm trying to respond to a point. But I speak.
Well, I'm trying to moderate for you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I've completely lost you do not need to moderate for me. I'm doing just fine on my own. Ice beans, please.
No, go ahead. I completely lost my point.
My position here, just to reiterate for the audience and for the panelists, is that medically assisted suicide, government sanctioned medically assisted suicide, has a corrosive effect on society. Instead of treating the underlying conditions that lead to people wanting to commit suicide, who have low qualities of life and things like that, we are simply showing them the door to life. And
it's not doing it instead of it. It's not doing it instead of it, though. It's doing it when those things no longer work.
Wick, can I rephrase what you've just said in a way how I've heard it?
Go ahead.
We shouldn't have medically assisted death because we can just fix society.
We can. We can fix
but that's not happening, Wick. Come on.
I don't know why you gloss over the fact that at least currently, like we can talk about the future, but like currently, like 80% of the people who apply for MAID, they're in palliative care. Like why are you like glossing over?
Why
that?
are we ignoring the 20% that aren't?
No. Corey.
Talk about those things.
Corey,
go ahead.
We are primarily glossing over this because Wick has also conceded that for those people who are terminally ill and going to die, it's all right. So what we're talking about is the cases where it's not all right.
In your opinion, like...
And
so
Wick has said this too.
Because the question is, should these people have the right to apply for it? It's not like it's it's not just on the whims of like the patient. Like it has to be like approved. There's medical professionals involved. So it's not like it's not like you just get the prescription on the prescription pad and then they just like go and it gets carried out. Like there's a process. There's a reason why there's a process because like the process should hopefully take care of Wick's concerns or address Wick's concerns, where it's not just like someone on an impulse, they somehow, within 24 hours get medically assisted death. It's just not how it works.
That's also not what he's saying.
No, stop. We're going to let Chris speak go. We're going to let Chris speak go, and then you can go very next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on the note of what you were saying earlier, it's also the fact that, like, some of these concerns are just removed from reality. Like, earlier you've asked, for instance, that, like, why is it the case that 2 of the doctors can say yes and 5 of the doctors say no, and we disregard 5 of the doctors? What is the other option? What's the other proposition? Is it that everyone is to agree? What if one doctor decides to veto this on account of their own personal ethics, right? If we've got MD Wick who's saying that, like, I am not fine with you, like, going through with this, and he says no, does that mean that you no longer have the dignity to do this? What's the alternative?
The specific I was pointing out there.
I just want to like reiterate, right? Because fucking obviously everyone here on the panel acknowledges that this isn't going to work out perfectly in 100% of the scenarios. Obviously, everyone agrees that we should prioritize things like therapy, right? Like getting different forms of help. This shouldn't be the go-to. Nobody's arguing that it is. Nobody in the right fucking mind, and at least to my understanding, nobody on this panel is arguing that. We're just talking about where the law currently stands, right? How it works, and what is the actual concern that you have with this, beyond just the fact that I disagree, I suppose.
Again, it's not just that I disagree, it's that we've seen how these things work. Like when you talk about, oh, you only need 2 doctors, like opioids, I'm going to refer to that and how that worked. A lot of doctors, most of them, said, hey, no, you don't need this, so I'm not going to recommend this. So what happened?
Yeah, but you can't,
they shopped around.
Pick and choose.
Stop. They shopped around until they found doctors who were lazy enough to just sign them off. And the same thing has a very good chance of happening when you lower the restrictions, such as Canada has done. This is a valid concern to brush it off.
It's valid concern, but the reason that it's valid concern, Wick, I'm not disregarding your concern. I'm saying that you can't go pick and choose with the idea of we've seen how this works, quote unquote, because you go to opioid crisis and saying that there's a parallel there, but when we bring up Netherlands, you're saying that there is a fundamental difference when Netherlands is going through the exact same system over the last 2 decades, and your concerns aren't borne out in reality.
It's the exact same system. It is not. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of both the Netherlands and the Canada.
What is the tangible difference between the two that we have an issue with right now?
Very more lax.
What is the tangible difference?
Right? They're much more lax in Canada. You don't. The process is not.
By the current numbers, and current numbers in Canada are not showing your concern in reality.
They haven't even implemented this change until March. So of course you won't see a change yet because they haven't implemented this yet. They have announced that they are going to, and in March 1st in 223, they are going to implement it. That's why we're talking about it now.
The place that has implemented something similar to this is Netherlands, and you're saying that this doesn't work because it's fundamentally different, but you're bringing up opioid crisis like it's
why
similar.
Bring up opioids? Like that's then it's not analogous.
Because the concern that Gorps brought up was that some doctors, right, and the whole idea that you only need 2 doctors to approve on these things is going to have people shop around for doctors, much like they did in the opioid crisis. You're going to be able to find some people who are
we go back to the Netherlands example, like the closest analogy, like that.
Sorry, I'll just say one last thing and then I'll let you go because I understand I'm talking a lot. The idea that people will just go and shop for doctors to get the sufficient number that agree with them so they can proceed with this is going to remain a reality no matter how much you bring that number up to, unless the fucking level is so ridiculous that it cannot be met, at which case there's no point.
We already have mechanisms in place to deal with this notion of shopping around for doctors. When someone does this and there's a doctor who is like lax with giving prescriptions or something like that, right? I mean, it may take a while sometimes, but eventually there's a process where they lose their fucking license. That is the case no matter what the issue is that we're talking about, right? That's not something unique to assisted suicide. That's
but the potential harms when it comes to assisted suicide are far more than other situations.
I would actually disagree. To me, the potential harms of something like the opioid example is significantly more.
Opioids aren't that fair. I'll give you that. Fair. Opioids were more widespread. Of course, they didn't all lead to terminal, but it did reduce quality of life significantly. So I'll give you that point. But still, when we talk about, go ahead, please.
Wait, I was gonna say, especially given how much scrutiny these people are gonna be getting, how much consideration there is around, how much essentially they have to go through a gigantic checklist of everything before they can even sign off on these procedures. How likely do you think it is that 2 doctors would be able to essentially come to the same conclusion on false evidence?
What do you mean false evidence, right?
So what you're worried about is essentially 2 doctors
it doesn't
prescribing this where it shouldn't be.
Well, it doesn't even have to be false evidence, right? It could simply be lax assuming, right? And mistakes can be made even by the best meaning doctors, right? But I'm setting that aside right now, and I'm just talking about people who are just simply lazy and lax things. So obviously, right, I can't give you an exact percentage of what percent of doctors or how percentage likely this is to happen. I am simply saying it has happened in many other cases before, with the opioid crisis being the most recent example of this happening. And it caused devastation in North America, right?
Right, but
Especially among the poor, right?
But what I'm saying is that even if like it is like so my other the concern that I had related to essentially are doctors going to be ready for this kind of like basically patients walking in saying I want this kind of thing, like will they be well versed in the requirements, will they be well versed in like what they have to check off before they can say it, and that's really all my concern was. So it's more of like a checklist thing than it is an ethical thing. I'm fine with them doing it if they have the training, right? But okay, I lost my point. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I know Gorps wanted in, and Corey wanted in, and then Ninetails. Go ahead.
Not gonna lie, I forgot the overall point I was gonna make. I have another one that's kind of off topic. It's still on topic. But so the mental illness is primarily treated as well as diagnosed from self-report. Yes? Can we all agree on that? Like, it's a matter of you say how you're feeling, and they say yes or no, or they say you have this because this is how you're feeling. Right?
I think that's kind of. I think that's different than different than like a self-report, self-diagnosis, right? Like the connotation is different.
Saying your symptoms is different than self-report.
Okay, well, you're self-reporting that these are your symptoms, right? There's no way to test for these symptoms. Okay? What is to stop someone from exaggerating in order to get the assisted suicide? Like, what if someone...
I'll bite the bullet on this one. I think that if you, in favor of the people who are suffering, who would go through this in, like, the most ethical way possible, if there's gonna be an offset of people who go through this by lying only to get there in the end, then, like, fucking GG, go for it, my dude. Like, if you've managed to jump all the hoops, you fucking deserve it. Just knock yourself out. As far as I am concerned, the majority here matters significantly more than to be worried about the minuscule offshoot of the people who are going to do this inappropriately. And it's the exact same reason why whenever we talk about, and obviously I don't want to derail the whole fucking panel, but why when we talk about trans issues, we do not focus on detransitioners, because focusing on the minuscule fucking subset of the overall population is stupid when it comes to determining whether something should or shouldn't be legal.
And
it's
also,
still relevant.
It doesn't seem like you like understand how medical care works. It's like you think someone who's never been diagnosed that just like show up the first time to the doctor, report symptoms, and then they get their medical assistance in death. Like if you look at the patients, for pretty much all patient there's a patient history. They don't just like start from day one. They start faking symptoms, and then the next day they get their medical assistance in death. Like
I'm not saying that's how it's that quick. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it's entirely based on self-report, and people lie all the time, right? I have lied in my own therapy.
Yeah, okay, and so to Chris's point,
and it's very easy to lie.
In that case, so hold on. So let's look at the other side of this in that case, because I'm willing to bite the bullet that if somebody's willing to like go through all the hoops by lying, then like I think they like at that point it still doesn't mean that I wouldn't want medically assisted suicide to be available. So in that case, medically assisted death. So in that case, what about the other side of the coin? What about people who have seeked every resource available, who have jumped through every hoop other than that one to seek help, and by the end of this, no hope is available for them, nothing that they're doing seemingly improves their lives, and they want to go through with it? Do you think that those people still shouldn't be allowed?
I think that what you're talking about is a very small minority, which you think shouldn't be talked about.
But you bring up this scenario
I didn't mention, hold on. I didn't mention that they shouldn't be spoken about. I said that I'm willing to bite that bullet, because as far as I am concerned, that small minority of people doesn't outweigh the benefit to the majority. I am not implying that it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that's simply a bullet I'm willing to bite, because that's just how we make these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and like this isn't like an actual stat, but like that 1% of people, I am willing to say, yes, you can suffer. Because this 99% of people will get better, even if they don't feel like that at the time. Right? I feel like wait.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But like I get what you're saying. I like obviously I disagree, but I understand where you're coming from. So in that case, the question would be, if we had sufficient research to point to in the direction that this isn't 99% who don't suffer, but it's more like, where would that percentage have to be for you personally, do you think? And you obviously I'm putting you on the spot, so if you don't have like the fucking percentage in your mind, that's fine. But where would it have to be for you to be okay with this? Or are you against this on principle?
When it comes to like this for mental illness, I'm against it on principle, because people in bad mental states tend to not think it will ever, or tend to think it will never get better, and then it ends up getting better.
Sure.
Right,
but
so
if you're against it in principle, then the
just real
stats of
quick.
99 to 1 doesn't apply here.
Just real quick, Chris. So, like, it doesn't just that standard doesn't just apply to mental illness. When people are in very dire straits, and I've been in dire straits in my life, there is this sense of inevitable demise, right? That it will
Yeah,
never
I'm
get
familiar,
better.
yeah.
That it will never be
I understand what you're saying, yeah. I understand.
Happening,
yeah, but that's what I'm
right?
saying. That's why I bit that bullet. That's what I'm saying. I understand that there are going to be people like that who have other avenues and who still go through with medically assisted death, because those people will always be able to slip past whatever barriers we erect in place. I'm saying that despite the existence of those people, for the majority that will use this system correctly, I am still willing to bite the bullet and say that those people who use it incorrectly are a sacrifice that I am ready for, okay? I can go all
Chris.
Thanos on this specifically, because I'm not against this on principle.
Chris,
I feel like
could you?
those people are the most likely people to end up finding a different way to kill themselves.
Of course they would
right?
be. Of course they would be, Ice Beans. But you understand why I'm biting the bullet.
Yeah,
on this.
no,
Like,
no,
you're
no.
absolutely right. But
No, I agree. But I'm just pointing out that like they're gonna kill themselves anyway.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Is it's funny. The only kind of person who would ever be so determined as to like lie their way through in order to get this medically assisted death or whatever. That's the exact kind of person who's going to.
yeah,
like,
but
be
then
determined.
I get that in sync. But the reason why I was asking that question, Gorps specifically, is because if we can determine whether Gorps is, well, it's Gorps and Whig, but I use Gorps as an example. If Gorps is against this on principle, then there isn't going to be anything I can say in the space of a 2-hour debate panel with fucking 7 other people on it that's going to change his mind. But if he's not against this on principle, then there is an avenue in there that we could possibly explore. But since now I know that it's a principle thing, and if it is the case too with Wick, then yeah, there is nothing that we can say on the panel to change their mind. It would have to be like a fucking 1-to-1 discussion that happens time and time again. That's why I'm just trying to determine if this is like a principle thing or not.
Well,
The-
at the end of the
can
day, right? You can respond real quick, but then I have a statement to kind of maybe clarify why I'm doing this. And then I see your hand, Nine Tails, but I want to clarify, and then you can go. But please, Corpse.
Look, I think you and I are going to do the same thing here. But the reason that I am against the mental illness assisted suicide in principle is because you quite literally cannot prove that it will last forever, right? You can pretty much prove that, for example, a late stage cancer, you're gonna die. You can prove that. You cannot
No, you
prove
can't.
that someone.
No, you can't.
You can, especially when it gets like really close to when you're gonna die, you can pretty much prove it. Obviously, there's gonna be like a 1%. You can bite the bullet on the 1%. That's fine. But you can know when someone is going to die prior to their death, or close to when they're going to die, and
It's all
you
probability.
cannot.
You cannot know.
Yeah, okay, everything is probability, but you can essentially know, right? Like in practice, you know that this person's gonna die. So you cannot do that with mental illness. Mental illness, the people,
can say-
like the individual suffering is like, this will never get better, but that cannot be proved. That cannot be tested. What can be tested is terminal illness.
Okay, that wasn't where I was going to go, right?
Wow.
A good statement, enough. What I'm saying is the reason I'm having this discussion, right? Because as Chris speaks, like, oh, we're never going to change our minds and things like that. That's not the point.
Right? If you have a stance on principle, though, I just want to like illustrate that difference, right? That's what I mean. Like, I on principle disagree about shitting on my carpet, right? So we can debate, but you will never convince me to do that.
Okay, fair. That's cool. But to my point, right? That has nothing to do with that. I'm saying the reason we're having this debate is to explore the ethics of it for the audience, and so you can see different arguments for and against, right? I don't care at the end of this what you come out thinking, who won, any of that. What I care about is that you guys get the best access to different viewpoints, and you can think for yourself and decide for yourself what you think was a better way. And I pray you challenge your previous held conceptions and beliefs, because this is, at the end of the day, this is a question of what should society or the government or the law allow people to do to themselves, right? Should they be allowed to take their own and allowed to take their own lives? Should that be a government sanctioned thing? And my again, in most instances, aside from the terminal ones, my position on this is no. But Nine Tails, you've been waiting a while. Please go.
You're muted.
Yeah, my hotkeys weren't working. So yeah, I just want to point out a vast difference here between the party who, wants to see this implemented where it's appropriate, and the people who don't actually seem to understand how the process will work, because that to me is the most delineating factor of people who are for and against it here. If you truly understand that there are mental illnesses that cannot be treated, and that we are denying people the ability to ease their suffering, which is the point of healthcare, by forcing them to live like that, and having no other way to provide them an ease to that suffering. If not, consider how brutalistic some treatments that we put people through in order to exhaust all means are to begin with, like electroshock therapy, electroconvulsion therapy. I'm terrified of ever having to go through that. Schizophrenia runs in my family. My mom's schizoaffective, so that actually predisposes me to schizotypal disorder.
Just out of curiosity to ask you a question, is there, at least in Canada, do they still do electroshock?
Oh, yes.
therapy?
In the US, they do.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
It's for like PTSD and
It's
stuff.
disgusting.
Carry on.
But it doesn't work, in my opinion. Anyways, so to me, I'd rather be dead. I'm going to tell you right now. I would probably kill myself with my own hands before I would go through that. And I know that's very dark and very morbid. But I'm telling you right now, if my schizophrenia ever got that bad, they're like, the only way you're ever going to be functional, or that we can hope that you'll be functional again, it's not that they know, is through electroconvulsive therapy. It'd be like, this life, I've already suffered so much through it. And, I have a reason to live for, but that reason also has a lot to do with me being able to interact with my world, to be able to learn things, to be able to grow things. Like, I literally grow things. I study ecology. And if I can't ever do anything with that, then honestly, all that suffering will not have been worth it. And I'm not saying that I'm just going to say oh, I'm going to kill myself. But we often just kind of dismiss people with mental health disorders and say oh, well, you have treatment, so we're gonna not listen to you anymore. But if you listen to people's voices, if you listen, there are always two sides to every story and two voices you can listen to. But if you listen to the stories of the people who are seeking it, these people just want the suffering to stop. It's not even about the ethics to them, and the ethics do matter. But we can't actually stop it for them in these cases. And when we can't, the best thing we can do is not weaponize what we don't understand about the medical process and say, look, this person should have to suffer because of my ill-informed concerns. We have a system that demands that they be informed. So your uninformed opinions don't touch that, really, if you think about it. What we need is questions of how we can move this forward, and there are ways. That document I posted in the last part there's a section that's 4 parts that includes the recommendations. It's further down, and they talk about the things that are beyond the scope of even that document that need to be looked at. And those are the real issues. And I'm fine with it not being there because that is the level for experts to talk at. But bear in mind, this isn't all or nothing. Just because something doesn't work the way that you want to from your armchair position doesn't mean we have to do away with it. In fact, you're less qualified than anybody to say when it's time to do away with it or when it's not working that way. If you want to talk about cases where people where this was applied where it shouldn't be, then the discussion should be how do we prevent these cases, not how do we prevent the whole thing.
Oh, go on, Gorps.
Yeah, so... Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, Instinct.
But it's not all or nothing, Wick. I know you're about to say any case that does that is bad, but that's not really
Instinct, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to the thing about some of the treatment options being kind of inhumane. To talk a bit more about medication, because obviously that's pretty much the only thing we can offer a schizophrenic. A lot of the time when you're when you've got one of these conditions with heavy psychotic symptoms or whatever, you're essentially a guinea pig. They don't know what will work. There's a bunch of antipsychotic medications. They try different combinations of them until they finally come up with one that works for you. And these medications can have serious side effects. Some of them increase the risk of you killing yourself, Some of them have severe physical side effects. It's and not just that, but there's an experience sense. There's a sense you hear this from schizophrenics and people with bipolar and stuff, where they talk about how they feel like
the doctor doesn't actually care about helping them understand what's wrong with them. Actually, what all they care to do is just to prescribe some pill that will like essentially help you fit better into the boxes that society has designed for you, right? You feel like essentially, you're being forced to suppress because you don't understand what this is the thing about a mental illness is often you don't really understand what's wrong with you. And the thing about a medication is it doesn't address anything. It really all it does is suppress the symptoms. And if all it's doing is suppressing the symptoms, then it's not you never really get to a place where you are addressing the underlying problem that's causing the mental health disturbance.
Yeah, but case by case, right? Like there are cases where medication works, but there are definitely cases where it is just symptom suppression. Depression is a great example of that because a lot of people who take SSRIs have a decreased quality of life because they can no longer fully enjoy their life anymore. In fact, they feel like their happiness is phony.
We are equating these you are not fully able to enjoy your life with it anymore. With okay, I think it's okay for you to go.
No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not.
No, we're not, Wick.
You're straw manning because what we're saying is that you can't expect that just because there's a treatment that something is treated.
Certainly not. But this medically assistance in death is not a treatment. It is just giving up.
Okay,
but I don't know that we're saying it's a treatment. We're saying that once all treatment avenues have been explored, this is a dignified way to end it.
But that's the thing that we keep coming back to that.
I just really quick. I want to agree. I want to agree with the person to my right whose name I can't Chris. I want to agree with Chris that this has become dog shit because I've already pointed this out to Wick that this is not happening instead of treatment. This is happening after those treatments don't work.
You keep saying that, but the fact is this policy hasn't even been implemented yet. So yes, obviously
you agree. You're speculating.
Yes, we are speculating. This is a speculative panel. It's a speculative discussion. Welcome to the panel.
We agree that we should avoid your worst case scenario. Yes, let's avoid your worst case scenario.
Right? What will happen and how this will play out. What we are doing now is discussing possible
They're forming
issues.
the policy
What are the possible
around
issues?
the panel recommendations. That's why I posted it in chat.
Yeah, Wick, do you know how you've earlier agreed that okay, let me try this differently. We all agree, everyone on this panel who's arguing in favor of medically assisted death, that this should not be the go-to. No one here is recommending that this is simply the case of somebody being like, well, you know what, you look kind of like there's something fucking wrong with you, so you just go and yeet yourself.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
Right, and I understand that, so I'm just trying to make it clear that if that is the worst case scenario that you fear, we are here with you. And if that is something that will end up happening, nobody here is going to defend that, right? Maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't know how half you fucking people. But of those of you who I do know, right, I'm pretty sure that we're not going to be defending that being the go-to. Right? So now we're talking about appealing to like the majority of the cases, and we're trying to determine if in most cases this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. And it seems like the closest evidence relevant to this that we could point to, and I acknowledge that you've said that this isn't the same because I understand there are some differences between this and what Netherlands are doing, sure, but that is the closest equivalent that we have available anywhere in the world to the best of my understanding. And you cannot dismiss all of that on account of a hypothetical of what might happen because of some fucked up event in America.
So let me ask you then, Chris. So say this policy is implemented, right? And 80%, right, are done fine, but 20% are what me and you would both consider, oh, there's some yikesy stuff going on here. Would that be enough for you to say, let's scrap this?
No, 80-20 will not. If it's a 1 in 5, then no.
Why are you scrapping this? Why is the solution scrapping this? Why
can't we learn from it?
It should be instead we need more stringent guidelines.
Also, just to be clear, Wick, I'm saying that I wouldn't be in favor of this in that case.
No, I understand.
Are 1 in 5, then
that's why I qualified this by saying we both agree, and these 20%.
Right. But then my next part of this would be exactly what Icy Beans and what Ninetale were just talking about. If it was the case that 20% of people who go through this, in my worldview, should not have, then my problem wouldn't be with the end game, as in the medically assisted death. It would be with how you get there, because that would be the problem.
So I think that this is the problem with the policy, right? Is that we cannot at least to me, we cannot mitigate it enough to bring that number down. This is why against the death penalty, right? Because sure, in a lot of cases, they may deserve it. But even if there's just one, even if there's just one or two innocent people that die because of the death penalty,
I sympathize with this so much. Yeah, no, but the reason, I super sympathize with you. Fuck, I studied history at some point. The thing is, the reason why we don't do death penalty in most places isn't because of that 1% who doesn't deserve it. It's because it's fundamentally ineffective at the job it's supposed to do. You've got things like the Bloody Code of Great Britain that you can point to, where anything was sentenced to death with.
You wouldn't do it, but why I wouldn't do it.
Right, but I mean, sure, yes, I understand that you can do things for the wrong reasons. Yeah, I mean, obviously. But if you're right, like I am, then the reason why we don't do this is because this misses the mark of what we want it to accomplish.
Such a weird take, dude. Like, if you... just because something unethical is effective doesn't make it more ethical.
No, but this isn't unethical in my worldview. It would be unethical. Right. Sure, but then we're back to the
medicine. The healthcare system is driven by evidence-based medicine, and when the evidence seems to point to both sides, maybe then ethics drive things. But what Chris is referring to is that we have a hypothesis that something will work, we apply it on a trial, and if it doesn't work, if it doesn't treat the problem, then we stop doing it.
Be like, this is a weird trial to want to do, right?
They are, and people don't want to have to live as test subjects because that's the only way the system knows how to handle them.
Yeah, this is a.
And yes, I agree, we change that too, but that doesn't make it go away.
This is a very weird. Like, you can almost can't make any policy prescriptions at all, like almost ever, unless it's like the most innocuous.
Not when it comes to killing people, right?
Many laws have implications for the number of lives. This is not just like.
But there is a level of separation in those laws, right? Like when we talk about things like healthcare in general, right? Like we talk about healthcare. Obviously, there is implications within that may cost lives. When we talk about emergency preparedness, when we talk about war and things like that, there's obviously this idea that lives may be at risk. But when we're talking about literally ending lives, that is the policy, right? That allows people to end their lives and have government assist in it, right? That's the issue.
Yeah, but I just want to say ask Wick one question, just to maybe understand your position better, sort of to what Chris is alluding to earlier. Like, is it just on principle, as in, like, if a person, let's say, has like an extremely painful, like the most painful neurological condition, that's like, that's not terminal, but they just have pain day in and day out. You would deny them.
So look, in very extreme corner cases, I will grant you, right? Like in extreme corner cases where there is like, because there are diseases out there where they're like so messed up, right? That's fine. But that's a far cry, right, from someone who is simply severely depressed.
Do you believe that people with mental health problems can suffer to the degree that someone with physical ailments can suffer?
It's a different kind of suffering. It's not measurable in the same way. Do you think they're measurable in the same way?
So, like, that's why I sort of like...
Well, let's go with science. Let's go with things we can measure, okay? So the problem is, a lot of mental suffering is not measurable in the same way that physical suffering is. And that's why I'm much more comfortable going with physical suffering being a component rather than mental suffering.
How do you measure physical pain? What's the measurement? What's the units?
I don't know that...
You can't measure it either.
Like
that's why I sort of
you have to listen to the patient.
Neurological conditions, because like there are like a number of like neurological conditions that like they are exceptionally painful, or rather we take the word for it from the patient, and given also like whatever their overall body language, that they are in excruciating pain. But we're not measuring it. We're not like putting them in a scanner, because we don't have really good, as far as I know, good measurements of pain at the level of their physiology.
There is some measure, though, right? There absolutely is.
The measure is a subjective self-report, though.
Okay. I don't think that's true. I think you can measure the neurons, right?
No, you can't.
Let me Google this right there. I think you guys are
Wait. To go back to the Alzheimer's. Like, how would you measure how severe this person is? Like their quality of life. How would you measure that?
Also, just to point out, because you can't measure it, you can't also say that this person isn't suffering. You're just guessing. It's mysticism.
Yes, it's mysticism. You were exactly right. What the
No, I'm actually saying we should
engaging
listen to them.
Is mysticism.
You're saying not
There's
to
a
listen
level
to
of
them.
mysticism in this because you are taking.
You're saying not to listen to them, and I'm saying to listen to them. That's the difference.
Right?
You're saying is
There's a very good reason we don't listen to people for everything, right? That we test it, we try to measure it, we try
and
to.
you're not qualified to decide when.
Neither are you.
I'm telling you right now, listening to them is the first step, and then we find the qualifiers for not listening to somebody. This is how doctors operate. Sorry, I'll let you go.
Exactly. If you go to a hospital, right, and they ask you, like, the way that the nurses or the doctors, the medical staff assess your level of pain is they ask you on a scale of 1 to 10. With
I
10
understand the pain measurement scale, but that's not what I'm referring to when it talks about pain measurement on the scientific level, right?
No, what I'm
But we don't
because
do
a lot of the
this.
measurements just aren't because they're not efficient and cost efficient.
But your doctors don't do the tests that you're referring to. This is something that's done in the lab.
I don't even think there is any kind of lab-based. I don't think we have a metric for pain. I don't think we have that.
No, what he's referring to is the ability to put a tiny microscopic electrodes into a neuron that is used to transmit pain signals. We can't see how much they're suffering. We can see that the neuron is transmitting pain.
Yeah.
No, you can't quantify it. You can't quantify it with that.
So just look up I put also a condition in the Discord chat, and just look up neuropathic pain.
Also neuroconversion.
Yeah, absolutely. Where it's again, that's why I brought up specifically neurological pain conditions, because they're pretty much almost exclusively you're taking the patient's word for it that they are suffering, and these are actual medical diseases and conditions that neuropathic pain is it is a subjective experience. There's clearly something physiologically going on, but we can't measure that with the tools that we have available to us.
So at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
At the end of the day, physical pain, right? Some we can see, right? We can see it. If you're cut, you're bleed. Now, people will suffer to various degrees, and some people won't feel it at first, right? But if you lose an arm, there's physical degradation there that is measurable. Alzheimer's is an example of physical degradation that we can measure in the brain.
Only after death. Alzheimer's is only diagnosed after death.
But you can see the symptoms of it, and they're really apparent. The more advanced the condition is, it becomes more and more apparent, right? Alzheimer's is a tricky one. I will grant you this, right? But when it comes down to my concern with allowing people to simply self-report, hey, I am in an unimaginable mental suffering, right? And I want you to help me end my life, is because there are people who are unimaginably mentally suffering who, if we had treated them otherwise, might have gotten better. But because
you don't know
we put them on these pathways, we don't know that's not true either.
Okay, wait, can I ask you something really quick? You said you were willing to accept that there are extreme cases that you would accept. What we're trying to say is that these are for the extreme cases and nothing else. And I
don't believe that.
Okay, so that's why I bring up neuropathic pain. Neuropathic pain can just just on a whim just disappear overnight. It's a mysterious type of pain that yes, you can be in immeasurable, insufferable pain for days, months, years, and then in a short amount of time, neuropathic pain can also disappear. That happens. But so if you would deny this type of patient medical assistance to death, I think that puts you in a hard spot potentially.
So your guys are acting because I'm denying this path, that I'm denying them any form of treatment. I want them to have access to more forms of treatment, right? You guys are standing this one single form of treatment when I'm saying we should be expanding this, and this should not be a resort. This should not be on the table.
Nobody here is saying that. Literally nobody. Yeah, that is what I'm saying. It should be on the table. No, but hold on. That is fundamentally saying that this should be on the table and you saying this shouldn't be on the table is very different to you saying that we are saying that there shouldn't be other forms of treatment, when everyone on the panel agrees that this should be the end one that you go for. It shouldn't be the go-to. You should do everything you can prior to that point, but it should be on the table.
And that's why presumably we have all these steps that they have to jump. They have all these hoops to jump through before you can even make that claim that, yeah, okay, you're qualified for this.
There are measures in place, but when we talk about the Canadian system specifically, as Gorps has stated, those measures aren't as stringent as either of us would like, and they're lessening those restrictions. They're not putting more
According to
restrictions on
armchair
it.
expert
They're
Whick.
lessening. Like, let's talk about doctors who oppose this, right? We could find doctors who would absolutely oppose this and would be against this.
But you said we shouldn't listen to the two out. We should.
No,
you
you're
said we should
saying that
listen to the
because
2 out of
some
7
panel
doctors.
decided
What
it.
about those 2 out of 7 doctors?
Hold on.
Please, I interrupted him. What about those 2 out of 7 doctors who said that that person can, in fact, get assisted suicide? You said you said that that's not good enough.
Yes, I'm saying it's not good enough. I'm saying that relying on this.
So the one out of 20 doctors who's against it, like
How many doctors are against it?
Okay,
Not that many.
actually,
Not that many.
I was gonna bring this up earlier. So this was my issue with it, and I'll probably drop this link in the chat. So it's the Ontario Psychiatric Association, who basically said that they don't have an issue with like the ethics behind it. They just feel like they're not ready for it, like training wise. And I'll here, let me drop that link.
And I would agree. We need proper training. 100%. We shouldn't implement this until there are the means to do so.
And they are saying that they don't have the means to do so right now. So you are arguing against implementing it currently.
No, I'm not arguing against.
But that's what they're saying.
Can I ask you a question, Rick?
It depends on what the government plans
exactly.
to do. It depends on what the government plans to do. You have to know what their plan is first.
So they basically just want the period of like they just want it to be extended so that they can be trained and like essentially more research can be done.
I want to ask you a question, Wick, and obviously
Okay.
I don't know much about like the fucking cultural intricacies of Canada, so this is why I'm asking the question. This can go to like the entire panel. Let's say that you are a doctor and you have issues on the basis of training that you just don't feel comfortable recommending this to people, and so as a result of that, you have somebody who you're not sure if you should recommend it to, and you simply choose not to, right? Do we think that that doctor is going to face some form of illegal reprimand, or is going to be fired from their work, or there's going to be some form of a punishment for that doctor?
I'm sorry, you cut out for me. I don't know if it's my earphones, but can you repeat that, please? Just real quick.
Yeah, sure. If you've got a doctor in Canada who is amongst the majority of the people who protest, apparently, but on account of the fact that they don't feel like they have sufficient training, and you decide that because of that you don't want to offer this as an option, you've got somebody who's come along for like whatever that people go to the doctors for, and you don't recommend medically assisted death, even though a different doctor might. Do you think that guy's going to face legal reprimand from that?
But that's not my concern here. It's not about being reprimanded for not recommending it, right? My concern when it comes to mandatory reporting, we'll go over this again if you like. We are winding down though.
Can I just explain why I've asked that question specifically? Because that is relevant to the reason why I've asked that question specifically is because the claim initially was that there is a substantial amount of doctors who are against this, and the claim has shifted to there is a substantial amount of doctors who are against this, but on account of lack of training. So if you have a doctor who feels equipped to do this...
I was referencing Ice Bean's statement. I'm taking her word. I don't know, but that the Ontario clinic...
Yeah, I mean, she's on my side, so I'm just going to assume she's right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I
the
proceed on
Ontario
panels.
clinic is saying, hey, we're not prepared for this yet, right? They don't have the things in place that they would need.
And I
but that's different than
a
ethical consideration.
It is, yes, it's very different. But I would also say that even in that case, if you're a doctor and you don't feel equipped for this and you choose not to do it, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's incredibly fucking understandable.
Yes. No, no one is saying here, at least me and Gorp aren't saying here, that we think that these doctors are going to face censure or any kind of ramification for not recommending these options.
Right,
That's not
but if they don't face those ramifications and not recommending it, then the fear that this is going to be a go-to recommendation falls on its face, because the only reason it would be a go-to recommendation, or it would be very much on the table, is if they feared otherwise. If they were afraid that they will lose their jobs, they would obviously recommend this. If there is a consideration on this account and they wouldn't face a reprimand, then that entire argument crumbles.
No, argument is just a misunderstanding of the argument in general. But go on, Ice Beans. But then
I think the other maybe possible concern. I have no evidence for this really, but like is basically people like doctors who think they understand the policy But really, they are trying their very best to explore the other avenues or something. But that's where I would like basically say, as long as we have like those stringent procedures or those stringent policies, then that should not happen as much, right?
So
Yeah,
by
and
stringent
Especially
policy,
the
you would
cost-
then
Go Gorps.
by stringent policy, you would then be okay with restrictions. Like all of you, I think all of you at this point have said at some point during this panel that you think this should be a last resort. So would you support the policy being this is a last resort? Everything else has to
it
be
will
tried.
be. It will be. And I'm
isn't
going to
that
tell
the
you
whole
why
point?
it will be. Yeah, I'm going to tell you why it will be.
Briefly, because we have to end. I want to respect people's time, and we're going to get to closings after this. So go ahead.
So, okay, so let me get the thing up then, so that way I don't ramble on looking for it while I look for it. There is something called the final report of the expert panel on MAID and mental illness. If someone could post that in Wick's chat. This is an expert panel that the government is consulting to decide on which policies to implement here. We don't know what the policies are going to be yet, and some of these fears are valid, but when we read this, we can see that the experts have covered many of these bases and far more thoroughly than a lot of the people here are capable of doing. And all I'm saying is consider also the fact that some of these things are easier said than done when you're not the person suffering. Please keep that in mind. Have some sympathy that extends beyond yourself and your moral worldviews.
On that note, I want to thank you all. This has been a heated discussion, right? I thought more people would be on my side. That was my fault for not vetting your takes here, but I do appreciate you engaging in this with me in what I feel was a very fair manner. I think this was very heated, but it was a very good discussion. I'm going to give all of you a brief outro to have very quick closing statements on this and tell people where they can find you, because, gang, these guys are great. Are these guys not great? Give them a follow. Give them all the support, all the love you can. And, gang, hey, if you like this stuff, we got more stuff coming up you next week, but we'll get into that after I let these people have their closing statements. Corey Campbell, go ahead.
Yeah, this was an interesting panel, to say the least. But as always, grateful to be here, grateful to be invited on. My closing statement is pretty much the same as my opening statement. I support medical assistance in death in Canada, and even the new legislation in the pipeline. This is not to say that I don't share your concerns, Wick, because your concerns are valid. But so far, based off of all of the available data that we have, your concerns so far are unfounded. But if they happen to be found as valid concerns, then they should be addressed, totally. As Chris Speaks mentioned, I don't think anyone's really against that. In terms of if there's faulty legislation, it should be refined to have the best maximal possible outcome. But with that, I'm going to leave it there. Again, super appreciated to be here. I'm Corey Campbell. You can find me on twitch.tv, Corey Campbell84. I'm a biochemist. I cover science and news. I do the occasional workout stream. And yeah, thank you to Ninetails. Nice to see you. Chris, always a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Ice Beans. And InSync and Gorp, pleasure to meet you as well. And love you, Wick, as always.
Always. Love you too, Corey. Both romantically and platonically, in all single ways
Bring it on.
love can be done. Anyway, thank you, gang. Go give him a follow. He's great. I put his link in chat. Gorpsync, please.
Also, thank you for having me. It's a great first panel with you. I still stand by that this should only be used for people with measurable illnesses and measurably that they are going to die. Also, I just want to make the note that it seems like a lot of you guys are supporting what is not the actual law, and I came here to say that the MAID law, it does have a lot of drawbacks, and you guys don't seem to actually be supporting the law. You seem to be supporting the best possible imaginary version of the law. So we're semi on the same page. You just don't see it. I'll leave it at that.
Shots fired in the closing statement. I'm assuming your twitch.tv is Gorpsync?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, gang, I put his link in chat if you like him. Hopefully, first time on panel, hopefully not the last time. I'd love to have you back at some point. Go give him a follow, gang. Hit the follow button on his stuff. He's great. Next up, another first time on my panel, Ice Beans. And just to be clear, Gorps, I love you as well in every way possible. Okay, Ice Beans, please.
Hey everyone, Ice Beans, Ice_Beans. In conclusion, I think I'm not ethically opposed to this at all. I don't think that this is a bad policy. I still have like some mild concerns about essentially getting everyone on the same page as far as whether we're ready in March. But the most that I'll support for is maybe a delay to get everyone on the same page or get a lot of people on the same page. But that's really all. I think that people who should have that option to decide, you know, with like after jumping all the fucking hoops, I think that they should be able to decide if their life is.
Thank you for the follow, buddy. Welcome in.
Okay. So thank you again for being here. Ice Beans gang. I put her Ice_Beans. I put her link in chat. Give her a follow. She's great. Hopefully also not her last time on the panel. But you know what? I love you in every single way possible too. Give her some follow, give her some love. And speaking of love, Chris speaks. Go ahead.
Yep, I would still maintain that the opposition to this general idea is somewhat utopian. The idea that you're not allowed to seek medical assistance in death because of the I can fix you ideology is somewhat privileged and fundamentally removed from reality, I would argue. Obviously, we all fucking agree that this shouldn't be the go-to. There should always be a priority on mental care and therapy. And fucking obviously, nobody here wants to go around proposing people receive medically assisted death left and right. But I would say that the American Duma lens of either like anecdotes or the idea that instead of recommending this, let's just fix society is just peak fucking boomerism. Nobody's saying that everyone has to go through this. We're saying that it should be an option on the table and be determined on a case-by-case basis. The reason why it makes perfect sense for this to be legally required of doctors to take into account is because we move forward as a society for the same reason we demand that doctors start proposing fucking paracetamol over beetroot and bathing in goat's blood to please corn and get rid of your disease. I am more than happy to protest against this system if the barriers erected are lax and a bunch of people that I would consider treatable, as we've spoken on the panel, start going through this and dying, essentially. But I just don't know how realistic that is at the current stage. I would also add, on the note of understanding the law, the implication that reading through a single legislation makes you equipped for a law discussion is just laughable, considering the background reading that would be necessary for that. And yeah, I'm Chris, I'm a variety streamer and a VTuber, I'm very based, come and hang out. Always a pleasure to be on, and thanks for having me on, Wick.
No problem. I always love your pushback against me, right? It's great. You guys, you see us yelling at each other, that's our love language. That's how we express to each other how
there is a sexual tension there.
Exactly. We love having Chris on here. Again, go give him a follow at twitch.tv/Chris Speaks. He's really great. Even though he was dog shit wrong here, but it's okay. He takes it now and again. Next up we have...
It's only fair, you know.
Yeah, next up we have Ninetales, please.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of the fear of the other side of the people I'm talking to can be alleviated by both an understanding that you cannot measure someone's suffering, even if they are physical ailments. It's like trying to measure skull size. Like, you can infer suffering from various things, but you can't quantify it. We do listen to people, especially medical professionals, and these guidelines that, again, the bill that has yet to be released, Gorp, is being used to recommend what the bill should look like. They particularly say you have to look at this person's history of treatment and if they're responding positively to it. That's the metric that they're using. So there is a metric, there is a quantifiable thing you can measure, and it's whether or not all the other options have worked or not. And if you want to have more people put input into this, I agree as far as saying like this person might need more treatment or something like that, but we also have to realize that these treatments can be inhumane. Like I said, look at that document if you want to understand what the policy is probably going to look like. A lot of these fears are basically wrapped in people's lack of understanding of this.
Gang, Ninetales Cosmic Fox, that's where you can find her, twitch.tv/Ninetales Cosmic Fox. I put her link in chat. She's been away for a while, but she's back, and she came back strong. She came back with the fire. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for coming with your takes. Gang, we love her in every single way possible as well. Last but certainly not least, NSYNC.
Yeah, Ninetale Fox said most of it. I mean, I agree with the thing about like this notion of it being empirically measurable. That's what the standard. That's ridiculous, honestly. I also agree with the point about like some of these like this notion of like exhausting all treatments before making this available to someone.
sometimes these treatments are inhumane. And just as a little bit of a cheeky comment, I kind of think that the rebranding of medically assisted suicide to medically assisted death is kind of dumb. But yeah, I'm in sync. I run the debate server on Discord. I don't stream or anything, but you can find me at Nameless Debates.
Gang, thank you, first of all, NSYNC, for being here. This is the first time I'm having you. You came highly recommended, and you did not disappoint. We'd love to have you on again at some point. He put his, Stabby has placed his Discord name. So if you want to join his Discord, if you want to talk to him, they have a much more formal kind of style of debate over there, but I'd recommend it. Go check it out.
Can I ask NSYNC in that case, NSYNC, because what time zone do you stream in?
He doesn't stream.
No, sorry, fuck. What time zone do you do your fucking debates in? Come on. Jesus Christ, okay.
It's a Discord server, so I mean, I
Whatever.
personally am in the Australian time zone, but there's plenty of people who use the server who are in Europe or America or something like that.
Right, roger that. I'll just put it in there.
Okay, gang. So we aren't ending. We're going to take some open call-ins afterwards. Everyone here can stay if they want, but otherwise you're free to leave. I bid thee adieu, but...